crisis in Venezuela. The vice president addresses a crowd gathered at a Catholic church in Florida. We'll tell you what his take is on the turmoil. Terrorist target. The cell responsible for last week's attack in Spain says it was planning to hit a famous Catholic basilica. Ready to respond, the Pope guards talk about the threat of terror in the Vatican. And personal stories about Down syndrome.
I am an honor server and lecturer at my church.
And how these special children of God have touched our viewers' lives. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, August 24th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C. Thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. The U.S. pledges to use its economic and diplomatic power to push for free elections in Venezuela. It's a country in political crisis. Vice President Mike Pence made the promise while speaking at a Catholic church in Florida. Correspondent Mark Irons reports from the White House on the significance of the vice president's visit. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. Pence says the Venezuelan people suffer under the brutality and barbarism of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. He says the U.S. will not stand by as Venezuela crumbles.
No free people has ever chosen to turn what was once and still should be one of South America's richest countries into its poorest and most corrupt.
Vice President Mike Pence decries the political crisis in Venezuela. He told people gathered at a Catholic church outside Miami, Florida, about stories he heard during his recent visit to South America.
Everyone we talked to told us the same heartbreaking story of grinding poverty, families unable to find the food and medicine they need, and innocent children who are literally perishing every day from starvation and deprivation.
The sympathetic crowd at Our Lady of Guadalupe understands the crisis. The majority of parishioners at this church are Venezuelan.
I'm deeply humbled to be here at this church, which is a model of Christian ministry and charity, and a beacon of hope to so many of our Venezuelan brothers and sisters.
Earlier in the day, Pence met with 15 Venezuelan exiles in South Florida who said more help is needed to restore democracy in the socialist regime. Before the vice president spoke yesterday, Catholic Senator Marco Rubio called the situation in Venezuela a humanitarian and political crisis. He is grateful President Trump is interested in the plight of the Venezuelan people.
I have spoken to the president 7 or 8 times just in the last 2 months about this topic personally at his initiative, not mine.
Venezuela has been on President Trump's radar since February. He tweeted a message calling for the release of political prisoner Leopoldo Lopez after inviting Lopez's wife to the Oval Office. Lopez he's been released and he's on house arrest in Venezuela.
Mark, can you tell us about the concrete steps the administration is taking to persuade Venezuela to change course?
Washington has slapped sanctions on Maduro and his top officials involved in that installation of the country's all-powerful constitutional assembly. Any assets that Maduro has in U.S. jurisdiction have been frozen, and U.S. businessmen cannot do business with him.
Thank you so much. Correspondent Mark Irons reporting from the White House. The NATO Forces commander in Afghanistan says the new strategy for the country involving additional deployment of troops should help the Afghan people.
We'll give the encouragement to the Afghan people that this new policy is different. It's conditions-based, not time-based, and our end state is a peaceful reconciliation.
General John Nicholson spoke today during a news conference. It comes after President Trump unveiled the new strategy on Monday. Defense Secretary James Mattis slams what he calls Russian aggression in Ukraine. He vows more American support during a meeting with the Ukrainian president in Kiev today. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reports from the Pentagon. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Secretary Mattis says Russia is acting like a menace to its European neighbors, even suggesting the U.S. might provide Ukraine with lethal weapons to protect itself from Russian attacks.
Despite Russia's denials, we know they are seeking to redraw international borders by force, undermining the sovereign and free nations of Europe.
Secretary James Mattis directs harsh words towards Russia today and tells Ukraine's President Petro Poroshenko the United States stands with him.
Mr. President, we continue to support Ukraine and remain committed to building the capacity of your armed forces to defend their country and to defend protecting the Ukrainian people.
Mattis' visit to Ukraine's capital comes as the country celebrates its 26th anniversary, marking Ukraine's split from the former Soviet Union. Tensions have been high between the former Soviet states since 2014, when Russia annexed a part of Ukraine called Crimea. That was followed by Russian military support of separatists in eastern Ukraine. Mattis tells Ukrainian leaders the Trump administration will not accept Moscow's incursion. President Poroshenko demands Russia return Crimea, adding they are prepared to defend themselves if Russia pushes further into their lands.
We have our own anti-tank weapons.
But many prayed the conflict won't escalate. This week, Vatican Secretary of State Cardinal Pietro Parolin and Russian Patriarch Kirill agreed while meeting in Moscow that the Church must play a peacemaking role. Parolin also met with Russian President Vladimir Putin, who told him Russia values a constructive dialogue with the Vatican. The Russian Orthodox Church and the Vatican both agree that there's a lot of work to go in order to bridge and unite a divided nation. The Ukrainian president estimates some 3,000 Russian troops are still stationed in eastern Ukraine. Lauren?
Why, does Secretary Mattis worry that sending weapons to Ukraine could provoke Moscow even more?
Well, Lauren, Secretary Mattis highlighted today that these are defensive weapons. He was asked directly about this by reporters in Ukraine, and he emphasized saying defensive weapons are not provocative unless you're an aggressor. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby at the Pentagon. Thank you, Wyatt. Spanish media report the cell responsible for the Barcelona and Cambrils attack was originally planning something much bigger. In court this week, one of the suspects said the group was planning to attack La Sagrada Familia Church in Barcelona. Last Thursday, a van mowed down people walking on Barcelona's famed Las Ramblas promenade, killing 13 people and injuring more than 100 others. The head of the Swiss Guards says the group protecting the Pope is ready to confront terror attacks. Following renewed threats against Rome by supporters of ISIS, the commander of the Guards told a Swiss Catholic website it's only a question of time before an attack happens in Rome. Authorities have long considered the Vatican a potential target, and security around the Vatican has been increased significantly since the Holy Year of Mercy. Protests erupt in central Rome for a second day as police continue an operation to evict some 800 refugees from a building they have occupied since 2013. Earlier today, migrants threw rocks, bottles, and gas cans at police in riot gear. Pope Francis greets members of the World Council of Churches today at the Vatican. The General Secretary of the Council is a Norwegian Lutheran theologian. The moderator of the committee is from the Anglican Church of Kenya. The Council seeks unity among Christian denominations. And in Europe, it seems euthanasia has become common practice in nations like the Netherlands and Belgium. In fact, a new report says euthanasia accounts for nearly 5% of all deaths in the Netherlands. Another approach is palliative care. That's specialized medical care to help the quality of life of people with serious illness. Dr. Christina Puchalski, director of the George Washington University's Institute for Spirituality and Health, joins me from Rome instead of from down the street. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's nice to be with you from Rome.
You gave a seminar this morning at the Vatican on treating dying patients, not only physically, but spiritually. Tell us your message.
The message is that spirituality, broadly defined as meaning, purpose, and connectedness to the significant or sacred, is immensely important in the care of patients, and not just dying patients, but across all of life. In particular, I'm a palliative care physician, so particularly in our field of caring for people with serious illness, spiritual distress and suffering is very prominent, and it's an absolute essential for physicians, nurses, and others on the team to attend to that suffering.
What is the difference between the approach in Europe for caring for the terminally ill and in the United States?
The approach is similar in terms of palliative care. Palliative care, in fact, was started in Europe, so the United States learned from Europe about caring for chronically ill patients. I would say in the United States we're very intentional about the inclusion of spirituality in palliative care. We have increasing numbers of board-certified chaplains that can help the team provide good palliative care. And we're working with other countries, including Europe, to try to expand that model so that people all over the world can have access to excellence in palliative care, which includes spiritual care as an essential component. But that we also recognize that we need professional spiritual care providers, such as board-certified chaplains, to help fully being present to patients and attending to their suffering.
Before we go, I know that studies show requests are increasing from people who are not terminally ill to end their lives. Tell us about that.
I think that the message of palliative care is a good message for people all over the world and in various stages of illness. And the message is that life matters and that you can continue to live even while you're dying. And if we can reframe in our culture, not just in the United States, but all over the world, that dying is a spiritual journey, then I think you won't need to ask that question, because people will find hope, they'll find meaning, they'll find their suffering attended to, they'll find loved.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Christina Puchalski, Director of George Washington University's Institute for Spirituality and Health.
Okay, thank you so much. It was good to speak with you.
A service was held today to mark the first anniversary of an earthquake in central Italy that killed nearly 300 people. The Mass was held in the hardest-hit town of Amatrice. Italy's Prime Minister attended the Mass today. Last year's quake killed more than 250 people and set off months of powerful aftershocks. Coming up, how sanctuary schools plan to defy President Trump's immigration crackdown. We get analysis from an expert. A governor's decision to stop the execution of a death row inmate draws praise from the Missouri Catholic Conference. Missouri Governor Eric Greitens issued a stay after new DNA evidence was found in the case. You can read a statement by the Missouri Catholic Bishops' Conference right now at CatholicNewsAgency.com. A federal judge is looking into the legality of Indiana's fetal tissue law. The law criminalizes research using the remains of aborted fetuses. The Wall Street Journal reports Indiana University filed suit after Mike Pence, then governor, signed the bill into law. A judge is looking into whether or not to enforce the law or strike it down, and a ruling could come by the end of the year. As students get ready to head back to school, some districts want to guarantee protection for undocumented students by creating sanctuary schools. The Los Angeles public school system, known as the LA Unified School District, reaffirms its commitment to protecting immigrant students. We send a clear message to the White House. We will not cooperate with any form of immigration enforcement actions of this administration. We send a clearer message to our LA Unified students and families. Every LA Unified school is safe for every child and every family. Joining us now is Hans von Spakovsky, Senior Legal Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Are the school districts that do this breaking the law?
They're not really, that's not really an issue. And the reason being that I have to tell you, I think this is just a political stunt. And the reason is it's been a long-term policy of the Department of Homeland Security not to do enforcement actions at public schools. So there isn't any danger.
It's an official policy.
There's an official policy of the
So
Department of Homeland Security.
So this is grandstanding, you believe?
Yeah, I believe it's grandstanding because there isn't any danger that people from the Department of Homeland Security are going to show up at any of the public schools. In fact, the Trump administration recently said, yes, we're keeping this policy in place.
In a 2011 memo, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, known as ICE, discouraged agents from picking up suspects, hospitals, and other churches. So is that going to change, have you heard, under the new Trump administration plan?
No, it's not at all. Now, I do think one thing that they ought to do and the schools ought to be embarrassed about is, look, one of the biggest problems we have now when it comes to dangerous illegal aliens are gang members, particularly members of MS-13. And they are, a lot of them are teenagers. And is LA going to say that if they get information that an illegal alien who is a gang member is in one of their schools, they think it's a good idea that that person stays there rather than call the feds and have them deported. That's a real issue.
What will happen to schools, do you think, that refuse to provide the authorities with information about students or families if they're asked?
I don't think anything's going to happen because, like I said, I mean, the policy is they're not going to do that to start with.
In your expertise, what is the solution here? Is it to keep undocumented children out of school?
No, it's not. But most of these people, most of these students are here illegally, as are their parents. And obviously, if their parents are picked up, you keep the families together and they get sent back to their home countries. I mean, that's the fair thing to do.
All right, Hans von Spakovsky, Senior Legal Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thanks for having me.
Police are trying to figure out what happened to Swedish journalist Kim Wall. She's been missing since August 10th. Parts of her body were found yesterday. Wall was last seen alive aboard a submarine in Denmark. Police have arrested the owner of that submarine on suspicion of manslaughter. Her torso was found Monday. Police are now combing for more evidence. And in Mexico, the 9th journalist to die in the country this year is laid to rest. Candido Rios Vasquez was not the target, but was killed Tuesday. The National Human Rights Commission is calling for a thorough investigation after the increase of journalist deaths. Up next, a story of hope in the country of Togo, as a small village celebrates its first Catholic Mass. Plus personal stories from our viewers on Down syndrome.
Because I love my family and my friends.
We'll hear more from Kyla. Today is the Feast of St. Bartholomew. He was one of the 12 apostles of Jesus Christ. Many scholars identify him with Nathanael in John's Gospel. Bartholomew was killed because of his faith. A Washington State high school football coach took advantage of his position when he prayed on the field after games. That's a ruling from the U.S. District Court of Appeals. Joe Kennedy led prayers in post-game, but the school district he worked for ordered him to stop. He lost his job after continuing to pray. The court says Kennedy wasn't protected by free speech because he was acting as a public employee. The parliament in Nepal passes a bill criminalizing religious conversion. Human rights defenders say the bill restricts the freedom and belief of religion. Pew Research shows about a quarter of the world's countries and territories have anti-blasphemy laws or policies. More than 1 in 10 nations have laws or policies penalizing the abandonment of belief. For the first time ever, a Catholic Mass was held in a small village in Togo in West Africa. It happened 3 weeks ago, and Father William Ryan presided. He made history as the first priest to step foot in the village. He's the founding pastor of Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish in the Archdiocese of Lomé. It includes 36 villages. And since 2006, Father Ryan has built chapels, schools, and wells. And guess what? He is right here with us. We are so delighted to have you, Father Ryan.
Thank you, Lauren. Nice to be here.
Tell us what it was like to go where no priest had ever gone before.
Well, we have 36 villages in our parish territory. I had always had this idea in my mind I'd like to get there and try to do something because there really weren't any Catholics there. And then we got a donation from a benefactor who wanted a well done, but he wanted it done in such a way that evangelization would be promoted. So I selected this village. We sent a delegation there, and
there you are, blessing it.
There I am. Yeah, we went there, and I was proud of our villagers from the mission because they went there too to lend support. They even waded across the river 5 kilometers away, and we organized the first Mass ever in that village.
What was that like to do that in that area? You've got a well, and you're saying Mass. And I was looking. We were talking a little bit earlier about the number of Catholics in Africa growing by about 20%, baptized Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
it's a huge growth for that country and that area.
Yes, well, it's an exciting place to be a priest, actually, Africa has a soul, and the soul of Africa is very open to religious sentiments. It's very open to the presence of God, the action of God in their lives. And,
how so?
Well, you know, Africans tend to be a lot poorer than we are here. They recognize that they're not self-sufficient, that they need the higher power, the one who created them, the one who has given them the rain and the sun, and on whom their crops are dependent. And so therefore, when someone comes and offers them the good news, a little more specific, that same God has sent Jesus Christ to save them, then they're open to the message. So we're hoping that in addition to doing the well, that's just the first step.
Well, it says you founded primary and middle schools in other villages. Do you hope to do that here?
That village is probably too small to have its own school. However, we hope to be able to go back. I told them the day of the Mass, I hope to be able to go back, pump some of the water from the well, and use it to baptize some of their people. But in addition,
always proselytizing.
Well,
right?
there's in addition to baptism, of course, there's catechesis. We hope to get a catechumenate started there. Find a catechist who can work with us and with them.
And you were here at the Archdiocese and you just felt this calling because of a friend of yours. How can our viewers learn more about your mission and maybe come volunteer?
We have a simple website. Unfortunately, with the slow internet connection over in Togo, it's not always updated very frequently, but if you go to togomissionparish.org,
togomissionparish.org, it's right there.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Then you can find out what we need, and basically it's three things, and I put these in the order of priority.
Please.
First, we ask for prayers, very powerful. Prayers are powerful for the mission. Second, we ask for sacrifices. If there are any viewers out there who are sick or even bedridden, please don't waste that. Offer it for the mission, and you'll see later on in heaven what the good was that accomplished. And third, we really need donations. If anyone can help us out, $50 will buy a tank of gas for our pickup truck.
That you have to drive around to see your 25,000 folks,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Okay.
And if anyone can help us build the building to bring some of these kids from the other school to our middle school, college, 7th grade through 10th grade, and have them be able to lodge there, then take a look at the website.
Thank you,
Shoot
Father.
me an email and I'll give you more information.
Oh, Father, thank you so much for joining us. God bless you and all the work that you do in Africa.
You. It's great to be here.
We're so happy to have you.
Okay.
Father William Ryan. Finally tonight, we celebrate people with Down syndrome. We did a story a few days ago, asked for your input, and I have to say, I am just so inspired by the personal stories you shared on our News Nightly Facebook page.
Hello, my name is Kayla.
Family friend Joan Gillette tells us Kayla Strobel was adopted at 3 years old and has been a blessing ever since.
I can do many things. I am an honor server and lecturer at my church. I love go dancing, singing in a choir. I even take horseback riding lessons.
Kayla uses her joyful spirit to share the value of life. She says too often children with Down syndrome are never given a chance.
If I were to be born today, I might not be here because 90% of babies diagnosed with Down syndrome are aborted.
Kayla promotes adoption, the same way she found her family. A friend, Patricia Borba, wrote to us to say, I personally know this beautiful young lady. She is simply amazing. And Kayla's not the only one. Laura Hansen introduces us to Brandon and Ryan, two of her co-workers in Arizona. She says they bring joy and happiness to my day and a lot of laughs. I love these guys. Leticia Velasquez praises the doctor who gave her encouragement when Christina was born. She calls her child with Down syndrome a gift from God to our family. And Ann Reslock admits she was terrified when her son James was born. Now she says the 3-year-old is happy, healthy, and the sunshine in our everyday. As for Kayla, she affirms everyone with Down syndrome deserves life.
We are all special, have different abilities. Give us a chance.
Well, if that doesn't bring some tears to your eyes and some joy to your heart, I don't know what will. We invite you to share more of your personal stories about a loved one with Down syndrome and the joy that they do bring to your life. Join the conversation on our EWTN News Nightly Facebook page. That does it for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly. Thank you for watching. To all of you around the world, I'm Lauren Ashburn. We will be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless you.